All right, class. So yesterday you should have finished your booklet on graphing discrete functions as well as your practice. So today we're going to move on to graphing families of functions. Now we're going to start with families of functions because once you know the 5 main function families, then you can graph almost any function that you're going to see in algebra. So a family of functions is a set of functions where all the equations have a similar form. Now, we know every family has one thing, and that's a parent. So the parent function is the simplest form of that family of functions and is centered at the origin. So the first function family we're going to look at that you're all probably very familiar with is linear functions. Now the parent for linear functions is just f of x equals x. So if we look at this table, we're going to use the table to plot some points. Now, when f of x equals x, that means whatever input you have the same output. So if we have an input here of -2, we're going to have an output of -2. We have 0, 0, we have 2, 2. And if we have an output of 5, that means an input of 5 got us that output. So we're going to graph some of these points and see what our graph looks like. So we have -5, -5. We have -2, -2. We have 0, 0. We have 2, 2. And we have 5, 5. So as you can see, and as you probably already know, a linear function forms a straight line. So any linear function you see is going to be a straight line just like this. So this is the most basic one, the one you're familiar with. Next, we're going to move on to quadratics. Now the parent function for a quadratic is f of x equals x squared. So if we fill in our table, we have -2. Now, even though it's a negative, -2 squared is the same as 2 squared, and hopefully we know that 2 squared is 4, so we know that -2 squared is 4. -1 squared is 1. 0 squared equals 0, and then again 2 squared equals 4. So if we plug in some of our points, we have -2, 4. We have -1, 1. We have 0, 0. 1, 1. And we have 2, 4. So this is a little bit different than the equations you're probably used to. But if you connect these dots, you see that x squared starts to form a V or a U shape. So all quadratics, anything with an x squared, it's always going to form a U shape or a V shape like this. We call it a parabola. So moving on to our third family of functions, we have the absolute value function. Now the absolute value function takes anything negative and turns it into a positive. Anything positive, it keeps it positive. So -6 input, then we're going to have an output of 6. -3, we're going to have an output of 3. Ooh, this is wrong. 0 should have an output of 0. Sorry. 4 should have an output of 4, and 6 is also going to have an output of 6. So if we graph these points, we're going to have -6, 6. We're going to have -3, 3. We're going to have 0, 0. We're going to have 4, 4. And we're going to have 6, 6 again. So, if you connect these lines, you're going to get very clearly a very strong V shape. Now, this might look similar to a parabola, but the difference between this and the x squared function is that these are straight lines. So whereas the parabola and the x squared curved, if we go back and look at it, we have a curve right here. The absolute value function is like 2 linear lines starting at 0 and going out. So we have 2 straight lines forming a perfect V. So this is the absolute value function. If we move on, next we have cubic functions. Now, a cubic function is like a quadratic, except this time it's going to be x cubed. So we're going to have x to the third power. So -2 to the third power actually equals -8. -1 equals -1, 0 equals 0, 1 equals 1, and 2 equals 8. So the cubic function increases very quickly. So if we graph these points, we're going to have -2. We don't even have 8 on here. Let's draw the point down here. If we have -1, -1, we're going to have that up here. 0, 0, 1, 1, and then 2, 8, again, is going to be all the way up here. So the cubic function changes very slowly towards the origin, but it increases really rapidly once you get out to even 2 or 3. So if we connect this, we're going to see that it comes in here, it's going to go up, and then go up like that. So the cubic function is similar to the quadratic function in that it curves and it gets steeper as it goes up, except when you're on the negative side, it goes down. So it's going to come up very quickly. It's going to slowly curve a bit inside the 0 as it changes from going in the negatives to going in the positives, and then it's going to go up very rapidly again. So this is x cubed. You're not going to see it as much as x squared, but it's still good to be aware of it. The last function is our square root function, or the last family is our square root function. So if we look at this, we have -4. The square root of -4 is, there actually is no square root of -4. The square root of -4 is an imaginary number. You can't take the square roots of negatives. So I wanted to put that in there to make sure that you were all aware of that. So there is no square root of -4, just like there's no square root of any negative number. So we have the square root of 0 is 0, the square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 4 is 2, and then the square root of 9 is 3. So if we were to graph these points, we're going to have 0, 0 right here. We're going to have 1, 1. We're going to have 4, 2. And then 7, 8, 9. All the way down here, we're going to have 3. Now the square root function, if you connect it, it makes a curved line going to the right. Now there is no square root function in the negatives. Over here, no square root, because you can't input a negative number into a square root, so there's no output that you could get. So the square root function only starts once we get to the positive numbers, and it's going to look like a sideways curved line going out from 0 that goes up slower and slower as it goes. So that's our last function. We made a reference table here at the end that you should fill out, so it can be a quick look back if you ever have a question. So the parent function for x is going to be the linear function is going to be f of x equals x, and it looks like this. It's a straight line. The parent function for a quadratic is going to be f of x equals x squared. That looks like a u. The parent function for a cubic function is f of x equals x cubed. That's going to look like that. It's going to start slow and then go up. The parent function for a square root is just the square root of x, which is going to look like this. Starts in the middle and then go over. And then finally, the absolute value function is just the absolute value of x, and this one looks like a v. So I hope you learned something today. Good luck on your practice, and have a good day.